Welcome to Now in the 90s, where we look at the game releases of 30 years ago today. This week, the biggest cartoon gets its first video game, the biggest PSA gets a video game, and one of the biggest franchises of all time gets another video game. Hi, I'm your host, Jared, and today is October 20th, 1993. A long time ago. 30 years to be exact, the second of a trilogy gets Super. Released in October 1993 was Super Empire Strikes Back for the Super Nintendo. Super Empire Strikes Back follows the plot of the second Star Wars movie, guide Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, and Chewbacca through a multitude of levels based loosely on the film. Every character now has a secondary attack, and Luke Skywalker's lightsaber got upgraded with way more moves, animations, and the ability to block. Go through the Jedi training of Dagobah by collecting hidden force powers for Luke to use in later levels. There are several vehicle levels, including the Battle of Hoth, the asteroid escape of the Millennium Falcon, and piloting Luke's X-Wing. Defeat iconic bosses like Boba Fett, Darth Vader, and some made-up ones just for the game. Super Empire Strikes Back was developed by LucasArts and Sculpted Software for the SNES, and published by JVC. The game is based on the movie Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I don't need to explain Star Wars, do I? There was an Empire Strikes Back video game previously for the NES. Super Empire Strikes Back is fundamentally an entirely different game and not just an updated version of that. It's 1993. It's more than a decade after the run of the original trilogy of movies, but Star Wars was still so popular and so desired that games based off of it continued. Those kids who saw those movies originally in theaters are now teens and young adults, all with disposable income. Thus, 1992's Super Star Wars followed in 1 year with Super Empire Strikes Back. Preview articles first showed it off in June of 1993 to coincide with the game's first showing at that year's Summer Consumer Electronics Show. This was when the new game's many upgraded gameplay elements got showcased, using the Force abilities, being able to run and shoot at the same time, and finally having an actual lightsaber duel. This was back when getting anything Star Wars related was somewhat rare and an exciting treat for fans. In their December 1992 issue, Electronic Gaming Monthly ran a contest with some of the most basic Star Wars trivia questions possible. The grand prize winner would get their face put into Super Empire Strikes Back. And for once, we actually know the winner. Jeff Krosno from Florida was the winner, and his face was used for a rebel soldier in the trenches of Hoth for one of the cutscenes. Even Nintendo Power got into the spirit of hyping up Star Wars. Their October 1993 issue 53 featured it as the cover story, along with a whopping 10-page preview. This is the same issue that also had heavy hitters like Mortal Kombat, Bomberman, and Cool Spot. Then editor-in-chief Gail Tilden even explained that Empire Strikes Back was chosen as the cover because it would be the most appealing to the widest base of fans. As for how it reviewed, Nintendo Power awarded it an average 4 out of 5, the highest we've ever seen them give, with a 4.7 in graphics alone. GamePro magazine gave a 4.75 out of 5, only knocking it for some unreliable controls. Electronic Gaming Monthly gave an average of a 7 out of 10, which still seemed generous as each reviewer mentioned how rough the controls are, and the lowest score noted how frustratingly difficult it is. Which they're right! I still get frustrated by this game to this day because of just how hard it is. Controls, whatever. It's all the crap flying at you from off screen all the time, and the never-ending enemy spawns constantly draining your life. It was still liked enough that Nintendo Power called it the 4th best game of 1993, beating out games like Shadowrun and Secret of Mana. Naturally, there would then be a Super Return of the Jedi exactly 1 year later in 1994. The trilogy of SNES games, Super Star Wars, Super Empire Strikes Back, and Super Return of the Jedi would all get simultaneously re-released by THQ in February 1997, because that was the same time as the original trilogy's special editions hitting theaters. I had to remember those exist, and now so do you. One of the defining cartoons of the early 90s and the start of a series of games for it, released in October 1993 for the Super NES, was Ren and Stimpy Veediots.
Are you a Veediot? Do you get video vision? Experience TV trances? Or have the urge to scream? Then you are a Veediot. And the new Ren and Stimpy Super Nintendo game is just for you. It's 4 adventures in one. The Boy Who Cried Rat. In the Army. Stimpy's invention, and Maroon. Warning, may induce fits of happiness. It's Veediots for Veediots like you. New from THQ for Super Nintendo. Also available on Game Boy.
Ren and Stimpy Veediots is a side-scrolling platform game. Play through 4 iconic episodes of the show. The Boy Who Cried Rat, In the Army, Stimpy's Invention, and Marooned. Play as Ren and Stimpy as you run, jump, and collect precious money. Defeat enemies by attacking with Stimpy's tongue or Ren's slap. Grab different items to help you through the level, and get to the end before the time limit runs out. The Ren and Stimpy Show was a debatably children's cartoon show that ran on Nickelodeon from 1991 to 1995 over 5 seasons. It was immensely popular with both kids and adults, albeit for different reasons, which of course means a prime market for video games. Veediots, published by THQ, is based on several popular episodes from the show and features several in-jokes for fans of the series. Cutscenes are essentially recreated shots from the series, and after the end of each stage, you are awarded with a simple gag featuring log. Everybody wants a log. Reviews for it reflected the game properly. It was not very good. Nintendo Power was the kindest with a 3.25 out of 5, liking the graphics and the voice samples, but not liking the basic gameplay and uninspired levels. EGM scores averaged out to be about a 5 out of 10. GamePro magazine was harsh. They said the graphics don't match up to the cartoon, the sound effects don't do the show justice, and that you'll suffer from boredom and frustration, and you'll be hard-pressed to enjoy this, quote, ho-hum cart. And then they scored it a 3.6 out of 5. Reviews used to make no sense at the time. This was the second of many Ren and Stimpy games, the first one being Space Cadet Adventures for the Game Boy in November 1992. From October 1993 to April 1995, there would be 3 more Ren and Stimpy games for the Super Nintendo alone. There's also some Game Boy ports, a Sega Genesis game, an NES port, and a Game Gear release. 8 more Ren and Stimpy games in a time span of 18 months. And they pretty much all sucked. You could turn anything into a video game in the 90s, but a public service announcement may be the least expected. Released in October 1993 for the Super Nintendo and the Sega Genesis, was the Incredible Crash Dummies. Crash Dummies is a side-scrolling platformer. Play as either dummy, spin, or slick to defeat the evil Junk Man. Run and jump on enemies to defeat them, but every time you take damage, you'll lose a limb. Collect wrenches to use as a projectile. Use Sonic-like springboards to launch yourself. Defeat some bosses, all while learning about vehicle safety. The Incredible Crash Dummies started as a series of commercial/public service announcements in the 80s, all about promoting safety inside of a car and buckling up. Those commercials became unreasonably popular, leading a line of admittedly awesome toys and eventually its own cartoon series. We've talked about the Crash Dummies before in our December 2nd, 1992 episode, but that was the Game Boy game. This SNES and Genesis one is completely different. This was developed by the studio Gray Matter, who also worked on games like Bob and Ren and Stimpy Veediots. There really isn't a whole lot to say about the game, as it's just a really subpar platformer with an even more niche subject. Reviewers weren't impressed either. GamePro magazine only gave it a small blurb with very middling scores, and Electronic Gaming Monthly just called it plain bad with a 4 out of 10. There would still be more Crash Dummies game to come in spite of that. The NES would also get its own game in August of 1994, and I'm hoping that's it. Much like the popularity of the dummies themselves, their relevance faded away in the early 90s, and their games have never been ported or re-released ever since. And crashing into every other release of this week, here's Editor Dylan.
Is pool considered a sport? Or billiards, or stick make clacky ball go in table holes? Well, whatever it's called, Championship Pool released on the NES, and I don't know why. There have been much more engaging pool games on this show in the past, and nothing really stands out except that everyone you play against is kind of a jerk. Your opponent laughs at you and forces you to break again. Fuck you, Doyle! You win the match. Your opponent stalks off muttering something about warped stick and bumpy felt. You ever heard the term no Johns, John? It's because of Johns like you. Your opponent congratulates you. Oh wow, that's actually big of you. You're alright, Abdul. Your opponent vows revenge. Okay, spoke too soon. But then you got guys like Tuon. So you think you're good now, eh? Think this is all gonna be a piece of cake, eh? Well, I'll show you. I'll show you all! Oh my god, are you alright? You okay? Tuon! Someone call an ambulance! He's having a pack attack for the SNES is a new take on Tetris with a Pac-Man twist. It's one of the better spins on the classic formula, and I recommend it to any puzzle game enthusiast. Unless you're a Tetris purist, then you might not like the extra gimmicks cluttering up the simple tried and true Tetris experience. You don't see Tetris breaking their perfect formula by putting, I don't know, bombs in it.
Tetris 2! Tetris 2. Tetris 2! Tetris 2! Tetris 2.
It's not just Tetris. Now challenge the system or go head to head. Different shapes, different shades, and this time, there's bombs in it. It's Tetris 2 on Game Boy or NES.
I stand corrected. Actually, Tetris 2 is kind of fun. I'd say it's as good as the original, but it's not, because they put bombs in it for some reason. But if you want something completely different in a puzzle game, Gearworks for the Game Boy has you switching in all sizes of gears trying to make, something happen. I don't know, I didn't get far. And I got the theme song for Tetris Effect stuck in my head, so how am I gonna segue out of the puzzle genre? Like this. Rubber baby buggy bumpers. Ha! You didn't know I was gonna say that, did you? When it comes to Arnold Schwarzenegger, most people think of Terminator, Commando, Predator, the 80s era. But for me, it's Total Recall, True Lies, and Last Action Hero. A legitimately great movie that I think only gets better with age. Fun, campy, action-packed, and the soundtrack alone is a true time capsule for 1993. Megadeth, AC/DC, Cypress Hill, and my personal favorite of the bunch, Alice in Chains, which actually got 2 songs on there. Needless to say, it's gonna be really hard to screw up the video game adaptation. They screwed up the video game adaptation. Side-scrolling beat 'em up with some car sections offer stiff gameplay and repetitive controls, visuals, and audio across the board. None of them are particularly worth it, especially the NES version. Why is it so much? The Game Boy version is even worse. What the hell? I just got back from the Portland Retro Gaming Expo, and I've noticed a few vendors using online prices as gospel, which is why I mostly got loose copies this year. But for a seemingly common game this mediocre, I detect foul play. Hey Jared, do I have time to look into this further?
If you keep it up this way, I'm gonna make these harder for you each week.
Worth it. According to PriceCharting.com, the Game Boy version of Last Action Hero went for around $100 complete. It remained consistent for years, but then some dankery started to happen in June 2022. A copy was purchased with a 50% increase from May's asking price, which is somewhat common, but by August the price shoots up to $350, which is about a 90% increase from June. Not unheard of, but so close after the first spike in value? What's going on? The very next month it sold for over $600, over 400% of what it was worth in May. That's quite a surge of dedicated Last Action Hero fans who just needed the Game Boy port at any cost all of a sudden. Is there any reason for that? Anything of note happen recently? Either gaming or Last Action Hero related? Well, one thing does stand out. Some poor, naive individual is suckered into buying a regular-ass copy of Super Mario 64 for $1.5 million. Oh no! The poor little fella got duped and now needs to convince every major news outlet that no, you guys, it was totally worth it. No, it's actually super cheap compared to what the real value is. You gotta believe me. Why would I lie about that? No, I'm not artificially inflating retro games to scam people to pay over 400% of their actual value. That's crazy talk. And because he's totally not lying or scamming anyone, then you get a whole bunch of new suckers trying to get in on this totally not intentional increase in common games that normally nobody would give a single solitary shit about, causing games like Last Action Hero to spike to 400% of their actual value. Or it could be because the Steelbook edition of Last Action Hero recently released at participating Target stores. So I guess that could be a factor as well. What was my point? Oh yeah, fuck resellers. Anyway, 13 games released on these consoles this week in 1993. Sorry, I kinda rewrote the script right after Pergy because I'm just sick of the inflated prices. But that's not to say I didn't score some sick-ass games there. Look at this haul!
Hey, well done. Thank you, Dylan. Here in the Collector's Corner, Empire Strikes Back value is not most impressive. It released costing $59.95, and now the cartridge alone is only $13. A complete in-box copy is barely $55. There are alternate versions with the THQ re-release with their logo on the box and a black and white manual, but there's currently no difference in value. Ren Stimpy Veediots also came out at $59.95, but now it's only $10 for the cartridge. A complete one is only $50. The Incredible Crash Dummies has easily crashed the hardest though. It was also $60 when it released, but now the game is only worth $8. Even a complete one is only $40. And that's it for today. Next week, another scary Sega cult classic, the only ant game that I know of, and stop me if you've heard this before, a new mascot platformer. I'm your host, Jared, and this was Now in the 90s. Thank you so much for watching Now in the 90s. We've gotten a lot of new patrons lately, and I wanted to thank some of them like Steve Gardner, The Original Eel, and Toad Health. Please like the video and leave a comment down below, especially if you've played any of these games before, and subscribe if you haven't already. And if you already are a subscriber, thank you so much for watching this show every single Friday. This is my original copy of Super Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I also have the other two, and I wanted to give a quick shout out to my cousin David, who visited me for the first time after like 8 years in the 90s, and his going away parting gift was actually giving me all 3 of his favorite Star Wars Super Nintendo games. So, thanks, David.